What feels like a cult, and is in fact a cult? Scientology. Throwaway account, my child's mother is a Scientologist. In deep posters, books, pamphlets, etc. frequents church quite a lot. Believes LRH is a great man. I've tried to have convos with her, and her husband, about it, but they are excruciating. It always leads to having to watch a video about it. I've been to one of the churches. It's literally an infomercial inside a building. Books for sale all over, shocking, and all written by L. Ron even though he's been dead for decades. They'll spend hours in an auditing session while my child sits in the lobby watching YouTube, which they don't monitor. I know way more about Scientology than I ever wanted to know, and I still don't know enough. And I'm very wary about my child growing up with it as an influence. Edited to correct weary to wary. Obviously I don't know your situation or country, but I dealt with my child's father being heavy-handed with religion, to the point I had to have a family court mediator order him to limit her time in prayer. He was having her pray for 2 hours a night. They told him 1 minute for every year of age, so at 6 minutes was appropriate. Anyway, my long point is if you have hesitations about your child's religion, and I think you should be hesitant because Scientology is so divisive, they could actually alienate your child from you if you are considered suppressive or some bullshit. I just want you to know you have options and rights. Thank you. Yeah, I've looked into it. Was not sure how much I could protect her with the whole freedom of religion thing. But I talked to her about it a little bit and am keeping an eye on the situation. Not Scientology, but what helped me keep an open mind about religion despite my mom being intensely Catholic was my dad taking me to other churches on his weekends. He talked to me about having an open mind and basically not putting all my eggs in one basket. It would also may help to talk about what makes a cult a cult. Don't say that Scientology is. In fact, it would do best for the relationship if you don't say anything about Scientology, especially negative stuff, but do talk about other cults. Your kid may be able to make the correlation early or as they get older. Good luck, man. That shit is tough, and Scientology is a horrific cult. I actually helped a friend leave JW by getting her to watch Leah Reminisce's show about Scientology. I never said anything outright, but hoped she would see the similarities as we watched. She's been out now for a few years. All of these nutrition places with their loaded teas are just a front for Herbalife. Most MLMs have the cult vibe. The Leolaric documentary talks about the major cult vibes they were using to work their retailers into a frenzy and not realize they were being conned. MLMs, but especially Mary Kay. I went to a convention once as the guest of a consultant because she was trying to get me to join. It was very Stepford. Also, she didn't tell me you were expected to dress up, so I showed up in jeans and a hoodie. I watched some documentary or something about this or a similar MLM, and you're not supposed to know you're supposed to dress up because the point is to make you feel crappy and like everyone else is successful. Now that I know this and I ever get the chance to go, I will put on underwear just for the occasion and nothing else. I feel like you show up in a Chanel power suit while everyone is in their Kohl's and act totally disinterested. Become the queen, start your own MLM. Gaslight. Gatekeep. Girlboss. Boarding schools for troubled teens. Nutriboom. You sound like someone who needs to raise, then lower their amino acids. You'll feel much better. Why would you want to raise your cholesterol? So I can lower it. The troubled teen industry. What is that? Like those scared straight programs. Worse. A lot will pretend to abduct you and yell at you for hours, keep you awake for days, not really feed you, even physically hurt you on purpose, because many kids who go through this don't get arrested as adults. Let's ignore the ones that do or the mental health effects, so it has to work. Pretend to abduct you? Oh no, my parents paid for me to be abducted in the middle of the night. It was professionally recommended to them by doctors. Threatened with handcuffs, and put on a plane out of state without any semblance of an explanation until after the plane had landed. They paid good money to have me kidnapped, and they still maintain it was better to traumatize me than to let me continue as I was, in an abusive relationship and acting out. This is incredible. I had no idea this was even a thing. I'm really sorry. The worst part is that I had it relatively good, by some of the stories I've heard. I wasn't even at a lockdown facility, Just in the middle of some woods out in Missouri, too far from anywhere to bother running away from, even though at least one kid tried after I was kicked out. The court-issued places were notoriously awful, as far as stories went. Court-issued? Judges would sentence kids to go to places like this? That's awful. I had no idea this was a thing. There have been stories of judges with financial ties to juvie prisons that zealously convict kids on the smallest offenses to fill them up. Edit, n.m.wikipedia.org. Jehovah's Witnesses. Whatever the Duggars are. Creepiest bunch I've ever seen. Quiverful. Absolutely a thing. Technically their church is the IBLP, Quiverful is like a DLC. Quite a few churches have Quiverful followers, mostly Baptists as far as I know. The name is from this Bible verse: Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them, they shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. They refuse to use any birth control, even tracking cycles. The only method that they are allowed to use is breastfeeding, which only works for 6 months or so. Many of them have kids 1 to 2 years apart. Yep. Grew up Baptist alongside some Quiverful kids. I was too young to really realize how weird it was, but all 16 of their kids wore identical long braids and handmade paisley dresses with big lace bib collars. I have to think, statistically, like 5 of those kids are gay now. Wait, were all of the kids girls? Being one of the oldest girls in a Quiverful family would suck. You would basically be forced to parent at a young age. That's exactly what they do. They essentially use a buddy system, where one of the older kids is paired up with a younger sibling, and is effectively responsible for raising them until they get married and leave the home. Source: Behind the Bastards podcast episode on Josh Duggar and the lunatics that he grew up around. It was worse with the Duggars. The oldest 4 girls had 3 siblings each they had to raise. I think the youngest might have only had 2, but they gave her the first one when she was 5-12. Ada, Michelle T-Dam and Yedam Duggar would pass off the babies to their buddies once the babies hit 6 months old, and the baby was the older sister's total responsibility from there on out. Imagine being 10 years old and having to sleep with an infant every night. Or a toddler. Or multiple toddlers in your bed throughout your entire teenage years. This is horrible. My family is atheist, but when my grandma's mother died, she was only 14 years old. Her father needed to work all the time, and she was left to care for her 3 younger siblings by herself. She married very young to get out of the situation and later had 4 children she didn't seem to like a lot. It's a vicious circle. Yeah, a lot of women who were parentified as teens grow up to remain child-free for the rest of their lives due to the trauma of it. Terry's speculation that the oldest Duggar daughter is holding off marrying, she's 31, very unusually by their cult standards, until her fertility has waned a bit so she doesn't end up with a billion kids. The Prosperity Gospel. All hail Joel Osteen. Imagine Martin Short channeling Tim Allen, you can't unsee it after that. Silicon Valley tech companies are not a cult. However, there is a subculture within Silicon Valley tech companies that is a cult. Here are some things to watch out for. Sleep deprivation. If your team wants you to do overnight on-call, and overnight pages happen more often than once every 7 on-call shifts, your team is a cult. Training versus guilt. If your team assumes that you already know all the details of the tech you work with, and dumps weird guilt on you when you don't know an obscure fact, your team is a cult. Rich lifestyle versus actual returns. If your team encourage you to pick up expensive hobbies, sports cars, piloting, ski trips, but the company doesn't actually pay enough to afford them without skimping on your regular expenses, your team is a cult. Scientology, look up Xenu. Hawaii did not even exist 75 meters years ago. L. Ron Hubbard was nuts. Yet Scientologists believe this shit. I can't believe Tom Ducking Cruise believes this shit. Anyone says they are a Scientologist, avoid them like the plague, batshit crazy. I wondered if they've just got some shit on Tom Cruise and he can't leave. According to Leah Remini, Tom Cruise is a true believer. It's John Travolta that I really wonder about. Tom Cruise is only a true believer because he's only had the celebrity experience, and since it benefits him, he doesn't care about anyone else's experiences. With everything that I've read and seen about Scientology, it looks like Tom and David are in a total bromance of functional psychopathy. Where is Shelley Miscavige? Tom Cruise is only a true believer because he's only had the celebrity experience, and since it benefits him, he doesn't care about anyone else's experiences. That's true for most Hollywood Scientologists, I suspect. They get a version that's specifically catered to them and works to keep them ignorant of the darker aspects of the church. Most of the high-profile celebrity Scientologists either were raised in Hollywood Scientology due to who their parents were, Elizabeth Moss, Juliette Lewis, Giovanni Ribisi, or joined after they had already gotten into acting, Jenna Elfman, Tom Cruise, John Travolta. Leah Remini is actually one of the rare ones that got to see both sides since her parents were blue-collar workers who joined when she was 8, so it makes sense that she's become such an outspoken advocate against it.